looking at cave diving. Cave diving. Cave diving. Gone wrong. Okay. Okay. Oh, we're gonna be ratchet too. Oh my god. Oh my god. I don't know how I can handle this. Divers get stuck in tunnel named the intestine. No. If y'all don't know what cave diving is, okay, y'all need to watch this video. If y'all do, well, watch it anyways.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Scary Interesting. In this video, we're gonna go over 3 more terrifying cave stories. To put it plainly,
you've been doing this.
if you ever happen to be caving and encounter a section known only as the intestine, it's probably time to turn around. Unfortunately, for the people in the final story, they didn't, and instead found out how the section got its name.
It's my first time
As always,
listening to this dude,
viewer discretion is advised.
It's my first time hearing this dude, so hey, tell me something scary about cave diving. Nothing scarier than cave diving, I swear.
In December of 2002, 3 friends, Kylie, Megan, and Kira, and the other girls staying at a group home in Cedar City, Utah, gathered together to hear an announcement. When the girls had quieted down, one of the counselors told them that a special field trip had been planned for them on Christmas Eve. This group home was a facility that provided treatment programs for girls with substance, emotional, mood, and behavioral issues, and field trips were common, but this one was very different from the rest. Each of the girls in the house also had a unique story that led them there, but if anyone seemed like they didn't belong there, it was Kylie. The first impressions of her was that she was a goody two-shoes just from the way she looked when she first arrived at the home. She had glasses, dirty blonde hair with bangs, and dressed rather plainly, giving the impression that she was a bit of a nerd. As the other girls got to know her, they discovered how sweet, down-to-earth, and most of all how funny Kylie was. They were always amazed by her ability to make even the saddest girls among them laugh when no one else could get them to so much as smile. Kylie was given up for adoption as a baby and was eventually taken in by an upper-class family, but unfortunately that wasn't enough to keep her from walking a destructive path as a teenager. She supposedly used drugs often and did a lot of partying, and she eventually ran away from home, and that's how she ended up in the group home. There, she made friends with Megan and Kira, and the 3 usually enjoyed field trips that were planned for them. When the announcement was made about the Christmas Eve trip, however, Kira couldn't shake this sudden feeling like something bad was going to happen, and she couldn't figure out why. She tried to tell the counselors and therapists in the group about it, but her feelings were dismissed as nothing. Once the destination of the field trip was announced, though, Kira understood what her instincts were trying to tell her. The counselors would be taking the girls to Bloomington Cave, which is a remote but popular underground tunnel system in the southwest corner of the state.
What kind of trip is that?
If anything terrible was going to happen that month, Kira just knew it would be on this trip. However, the rest of the girls, including Kylie...
This Christmas Eve, you know where the great trip's going to be at? We're gonna go cave diving. A cave freaking dive. Bro, who made that kind of trip? If you like cave diving, do you. Just go explore. Go explore that crack. Go explore that, that crack over there. Like, I'll be too paranoid to even step foot in the cave. If I ever gotta go on my knees, did it.
Thought that it was a cool idea for a field trip. For more than 100 years after its discovery, Bloomington Cave was a favorite hangout for Boy Scouts and cavers. Unfortunately, it was also the perfect place to do illicit substances or participate in underage drinking, which drew people who weren't terribly respectful of the cave. The walls were eventually covered in graffiti, and the ground was constantly littered with bottles, garbage, and even human waste. In addition, in 1952, Utah's Dixie Grotto Caving Club took an interest in Bloomington Cave and spent time evaluating how safe it was. Since the caving club's purpose was to preserve and further the study of caves, the club's conclusion was unexpected. They recommended that Bloomington Cave be blasted closed so no one would ever enter it. Their conclusion was that there was just far too much potential for inexperienced and unsupervised exploration. Plus, they believed the entire cave was geologically unstable, making it prone to rockfalls and cave-ins. So in January of 1953, the cave's 5 entrances were wired with dynamite and blasted to rubble. The closure wouldn't last long, unfortunately, because access points were created by teens who moved the broken rocks out of the way. A second attempt at blasting them shut occurred in 1954 with the same results. The effort was just abandoned. Later, the Salt Lake Grotto Caving Club caught wind of the cave's existence and took it on as a mapping project in 1977. They managed to measure 3,000 feet or 914 meters of tunnels, but at that point, they deemed the project too dangerous to continue as well. Then in 1999, members of a local grotto club spent 3 years picking up where the previous group left off and measured Bloomington Cave to be 7,136 feet or 2,000
that big
in length. Then finally, on the morning of Christmas Eve 2002,
why it gotta be Christmas Eve?
15 girls loaded up in a van and headed south on Interstate 15 to Bloomington. An hour and a half later, and after a long unpaved road, they finally reached the parking area. Before they went inside, the girls were split in two groups among the 5 counselors and then told to form a straight line. A counselor was at the front of the line, then 3 of the girls, then another counselor and another 3 girls, and so on. From the outside, the group had a hard time telling where the cave was at all. The south entrance was basically a hole in the ground after all the blasting, so the counselors and the girls had to crouch and crawl just to get inside. Then once inside, it was
I guess Megan's gonna be the only one alive.
Wide tunnels that can be reduced to just a few feet by large boulders and rock piles. Once they got in, the counselors reformed the line and instructed the girls to hold hands. After some cautious walking and crawling around the interior, the group squeezed through a narrow tunnel one by one and entered a chamber aptly named the Big Room. This room is easily the cave's largest area and is littered with stalactites hanging from the ceiling and large boulders spread out across the floor. This natural beauty of the area was lost on many of the girls though. After going through the tight passage to enter the Big Room, some of the girls started to express their growing fear. Before entering the cave,
good for her.
Were
You
excited,
need
but
to.
the further in they went, the more they recognized that what they were doing just didn't feel safe. But
I would've been
regardless, the counselors reformed the line once everyone had made
Counselor,
it through the small tunnel.
get off me.
Each other's hands
Get off
and
me.
continued on.
No, I ain't going.
Kylie and Megan were in the same group, and the two grabbed onto each other tighter and tighter as the line continued forward.
Kylie, Megan, y'all need to
And
go.
around this point, Megan noticed fear in Kylie, which automatically made her all the more scared. This was the first time Megan had sensed any fear in her at all, in all the time she'd known her. Kylie was eventually so scared that Megan had to encourage her to keep going and assure her everything was going to be all right.
If you're afraid,
Just
no,
then, for reasons
you
Megan
leave.
can't remember, she let go of Kylie's hand for a second. In that split second, the sound of tumbling mixed with screaming echoed through the
Time to leave. I'm gonna get a damn if I get kicked out of the group. I don't care. I'm leaving. I'd rather be homeless. If you feel it in your gut, it's time to go.
brought it to a stop.
What
Megan whipped around, expecting to see Kylie behind her, but she was gone. By that point, all the lights the group had were pointed in Megan's direction. That's when they noticed a rock ledge that dropped 150 feet immediately to their left they had no idea about.
Damn.
The counselors then shined their lights around the lower floor, and there was Kylie, laying motionless on the rock. Several of the
Counselors, they're
then
gonna
rushed
get
down
a
to her, while the others led the group and
whiplash.
called for help. When they arrived, medics ran into the cave and started making their way to Kylie, knowing every second could be the difference between life and death.
Get out. Call
When they
911.
finished
Get out.
climbing
Just
down
get
more than
out.
100 feet to reach her, though, they immediately knew it was too late. It didn't take more than a single glance at her to know there was no saving her. Afterward, it took a search and rescue team the rest of the day to remove Kylie's body and transport her to the morgue.
Oh my God.
The group home then informed Kylie's adoptive parents of the accident, and as you might imagine,
I'm
they
suing.
were devastated and wanted answers.
I'm suing.
Surprisingly, this would become controversial.
Sue.
The person who was still in charge of the group home as of 2022 told the Salt Lake Tribune that the group home bears no responsibility in Kylie's death. He pointed to the autopsy and claims the medical examiner told him that Kylie would have died no matter where she was that day because of an undiagnosed heart problem. According to his interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, he was told that Kylie's fall was the result of cardiac arrest and that no one was at fault.
Huh?
The more accepted explanation, obviously, was that there was a complete lack of preparedness.
So she died before she fell to her death? Okay, so she died before she fell to her death, but still, I would have sued for forcing them to go. I'm suing. I would have got paper.
Girls followed their counselors into Bloomington Cave that day. The group had only 8 light sources between all 20 of them. 5 had lamps, which each of the counselors wore, and just 3 flashlights for 15 girls to share. This is a sixth of what would typically be recommended for a group that size. Apparently, just before Kylie's fall, visibility was so low among everyone, they were literally feeling their way forward with their feet. That was the only way they could tell if there was solid ground ahead of them. It's still unclear if Kylie took a wrong step or if she lost her balance, but when the area is lit up, it's easy to understand how much of a difference being able to see makes to safety. It's important to note that the official police and autopsy reports list her cause of death as liver lacerations and blunt trauma, both caused by the fall and not her heart.
What?
The group home was never held accountable for its
It
full
should. Hit the liver. Bro, she fell to the death then.
On the evening of
So,
January 15th,
that's her fault.
1995, Frank
Bro.
closed his eyes as he ducked his head
my
under the
God.
shower spray.
What about this story?
The sun had just set outside as his mind wandered through a review of the day and what was to come in the next. Then, suddenly, he was snapped out of his daydream. A feeling had come over him, and it was a horrifically uncomfortable one. Frank's son, Conleth, who was known by Con, was supposed to be home by then after a weekend of adventure with a handful of friends. Conleth was a member of the Kevin Street Caving Club at the Dublin Institute of Technology in Ireland, and was part of a group planning to explore the Cradle Hole Cave just across the border from Ireland in the United Kingdom.
Oh, something happened to him.
The 10 college students spent the previous day checking out tunnels in a different cave system that really tested them, so on Sunday, a more leisurely exploration was planned. Once that was complete, they'd begin driving the 2.5 hours back to Dublin. However, even with all that planned, Con should have been home by then. Frank then turned the shower off, and the sound of running water was replaced by faint voices coming from downstairs. In an instant, he knew his instincts were correct. After drying off and getting dressed, he rushed down the stairs to find a police officer talking to his wife.
Listen, it's the BT Awards.
When they both turned to look at him, their expressions told him everything. Among the landscape of Northern Ireland, where bedrock has formed sinkholes, caves, and springs, Cradle Hole is the largest. Known locally as Douline, which is another term for sinkhole, Cradle Hole measures more than 100 meters long, 60 meters wide, and 35 meters deep.
That big.
It was once several smaller caves beneath the surface, but collapsed long ago thanks to the river that flows through the area. Thousands of years of erosion weakened the limestone, and eventually it all sank into the earth. The river then rerouted itself to run through Cradle Hole, giving the cave a constant echo of rushing water. The cave is also divided into two sections, Upper Cradle Hole and Lower Cradle Hole. The upper portion requires visitors to wade through the river into large chambers with beautiful formations all around. From there, water then flows into an underground lake which is 230 feet or 70 meters long. Incredibly, the waterway that connects the upper portion with the lower portion was only discovered in 2010, and much of the river inside the cave is cold and deep. This is sort of a unique experience even in caving, making the sinkhole system a must-visit for avid cavers. At 21
all that water,
years old,
all that erosion, it was sinking deeply, right?
He enjoyed climbing mountains. His dream was to one day summit Mount Everest, but he enjoyed caving equally as much.
I'd rather climb Mount Everest.
Cradle Hole that Sunday were 20-year-old Philip and 22-year-old Patrick. Both were members of the Kevin Street Caving Club, and Patrick was one of the founders, and Philip joined about a year after its formation. And despite being a caving club, everyone in the group was relatively inexperienced at it. This was far from their first cave exploration, but there was still a lot they didn't know about the way different caves behave. Around noon on that Sunday, the college students entered Cradle Hole and advanced into a huge chamber. On the other side of it was a narrow tunnel that continued on into the system. The group then waded through the river in the direction of the tunnel, and when they neared it, Patrick told the rest of them to wait while he checked to see if it would be safe to enter. He noticed the river was moving pretty quickly in the wide open chamber, so he was concerned that the current might be too strong when it concentrated in the more narrow tunnel.
Time to turn back.
On top of that, the water level was almost in line with the top of the passage. Of course, the corridor could widen out just beyond the opening, which would allow them to pass through it, but there was only one way to find out. Horrifyingly, by the time he figured things out, it was too late. The area around the karst landscape surrounding Cradle Hole had experienced several days of heavy rain leading up to January 15th, and although it was a beautiful day outside when they entered the cave, rainwater was still seeping through the limestone.
I feel like when you go cave diving, at least check the weather. I know you gotta at least check the weather because I didn't know this, but caves, deep in caves, they can experience floods too because all the water be flowing throughout the tunnel system through the caves. And every time when it's rain, it stop raining, the cave just keep refilling. It's like a recycle. Think about it, you stuck in your stomach in a cave, then water stop flowing in. That's the most slowest, most terrifying death experience in history. I don't care what anybody says.
Into the river. This greatly increased the depth and power of its current. Patrick didn't seem to recognize the danger he was in and smiled at the others as he took a big deep breath and tried to swim against the current. All of a sudden, he disappeared.
Patrick, why?
Philip was the closest to Patrick, and he entered the raging current to help his friend, but Philip was immediately trapped in the current too, and just like Patrick, it swept him away. Han was the next one in to try to help, and within moments, he was gone, just like the others.
Goddamn.
The current had swept all three of them into a narrow passage that was so flooded there was very little space between the surface of the water and the ceiling. This meant that air would be scarce until they were spit out on the other end of the tunnel.
Oh my
the
God,
danger
that much
zone
oxygen
seemed to be lost on the other 7 group members.
Oxygen.
They stood there expecting to be let in on the joke any second, thinking this was all a big prank.
Hey y'all,
This anticipation slowly transitioned into fear. Just 20 minutes earlier, they first entered Cradle Hole for what they believed would be a casual cave exploration before heading home, and now they were faced with a tragedy. The 7 remaining members then split up to try to see if the other 3 were maybe trapped in another chamber, but despite searching the
they done.
there was no sign of them.
They done.
They searched for almost 4 hours before realizing they were going to need help from emergency services. So around 4 o'clock, the 7 cavers exited Cradle Hole and called in the incident. That sparked about 50 rescuers into action as experienced cavers and police divers raced to the cave. Outside, 2 helicopters from Britain's Royal Air Force searched the outlet area of the river, but not a single sign of the 3 was found before the search was suspended for the night.
They buried on the water.
Around the same
inside.
time the effort was wrapping up, authorities began informing family members that their sons were missing. There was something inside Frank that knew better, though. something inside him knew that he'd be identifying his son's body within the next few days.
Oh yeah, but go on
The
and get
next
that.
morning, the search continued, and by
Get that
that
out your
point,
head.
the
Go on,
current
get you in your
tide
head, bro.
reduced dramatically, and the hope was that the three men managed to find a pocket of air or a large chamber where they could wait out the water. Tragically, that wasn't the case. Around 24 hours after they first entered Cradle Hole, Patrick and Philip's bodies were found, and it would take another day for Conn's to be recovered. Today, there is a memorial plaque outside Cradle Hole in remembrance of the 3 young lives that were taken too soon.
Oh, like a river, it's like a river through a fast current through the caves. I know them currents be tough as nails. You gotta be Michael Phelps on steroids. It still won't work. It's probably gonna take like the strength of like 10 Michael Phelps to swim through that.
12 Italian scuba divers were
here it
plunged
is.
into
It's tested.
brilliantly blue waters on the coast of Palinuro, Italy. Situated 124 miles or 200 kilometers southeast of
in
Naples,
Italy, okay.
Palinuro is a beautiful, quaint resort town that sees tourists from all over the world every summer, and especially divers. The day's dive plan was to check out the Immersione in Parete, which
This right here, this is what I really want to do. Like this type of diving right here, not in the cave, just out here. That's what I really want to do. Open like this. I do want to touch a couple fish. It will pat a dolphin, a whale shark.
What?
But a regular shark, yeah, y'all can have that.
wall.
Immerse wall.
This
okay.
massive underwater cliff is dotted with several cave openings and is a beautiful natural habitat for all sorts of underwater sea life, making it perfect for diving. The dive organizer was Mauro Camardella, the owner of a local diving center and a dive instructor who taught 3 different types of certifications. Camardella lived like he belonged in the water, and rarely did a day go by without the 49-year-old getting in the water. Along with him for the dive was Mauro Tancredi, who was an assistant instructor at Camardella's diving center, and their 58-year-old friend Silvio. Silvio wasn't a dive instructor like the other two, but he was an expert in scuba diving and shared Camadella's passion for underwater exploration.
They are experienced,
Now,
okay.
in addition to Palinuro being known for its gorgeous underwater rock formations and mysterious caves, it's also known for the curse of Palinuro. The town has had several diving accidents and tragedies over the years. In 1984, 2 underwater speleologists drowned during a research dive. Then, later, 3 divers from Poland died after becoming trapped in one of the caves in 1996. Then, in 2012, 4 more divers were killed when the roof of the cave they were exploring collapsed. This wouldn't be anything for the group of 12 to worry about, though, because they didn't have any plans to enter any of the caves.
Okay, I was going to say.
Soon
Oh, they
enough,
got
all
plans,
12
okay.
divers were in the water, taking in the breathtaking views of all the beauty beneath Palinuro's waters. Then, a little while later, they began resurfacing at the agreed-upon rendezvous time, around 11:30. When 9 of the divers surfaced, they waited in the water for the dive organizer and his 2 friends, excitedly sharing what they thought of the immersion wall with one another. Considering the diving expertise of the 3 men who hadn't returned yet, there was very little worry among the others. They just figured the 3 of them decided to extend their dive for a while longer, or maybe they came across something they'd never seen before, or they just lost track of time. Then, when the other 3 still hadn't returned to the surface after more time had passed, others began to suspect something had actually happened. Some of the divers on the excursion hurried to the wall to see if they could see any of the men, but none of them had cave diving certification. Obviously, no one wanted to be added to the list of the missing, so they remained outside the cave and continued to search the sea for them through the night. Eventually, exhausted without any luck, the authorities were finally contacted, which is something that probably should have taken place at least half a day sooner. But in any case, the Palinuro Fire Service arrived sometime later, and although they were trained in underwater rescue, its members were not expert cave divers, so authorities reached out to a 61-year-old local named Fabio. He was another of Palinuro's diving experts. He was actually the first to map out one of the caves in the wall called the Grotto
You should have been called him.
This translates to Cave of the Ladder or Ladder Cave, which was named for 2 long sections that run vertically. The cave entrance, which is only about 4 feet or 1.5 meters wide, sits on a wall about 46 feet or 14 meters below the surface. From the entrance, the first tunnel extends horizontally until intersecting with the first vertical shaft. Going down into the shaft, the bottom curves and gradually returns to horizontal, and then to the end of the bottom tunnel. At the end of this tunnel is an extremely tight restriction at around 164 feet or 50 meters below the surface. Along the bottom of this tunnel is also a combination of sand and silt, and because of how narrow it is, a silt out is a virtual certainty, especially for inexperienced cave divers who don't know how to handle that type of situation. When Fabio mapped it, he called this cramped tunnel the intestine of Palinuro. And knowing what he knew, he had a feeling this story wouldn't have a happy ending. The intestine is also about 52 feet or 16 meters in length, and the undulating walls inside close in to less than 3 feet or less than a meter at some points. If they made it through this tunnel, they would have come upon a fork with one tunnel above them and another straight ahead. Choosing the tunnel above them would have taken them back to sea level, but they'd still be enclosed inside the rock, inside of an air pocket at the very
Okay.
top of the shaft.
They could have went
Even
the
if
other
they
way.
had ended up in the air pocket, it likely didn't have nearly enough oxygen to sustain even one person for very long, let alone 3. This meant there was only one hope for the men, and
Get
that
back
was
down.
if they managed to make it through the intestine and then chose to bypass the vertical shaft and continue straight ahead.
Yeah.
Had they done that, they would have reached the back entrance to the cave
They have
and
not done
reached
that.
the open sea on the other side of the rock. But Fabio was sure that if they had managed to make it out the back entrance, they would
They
have
died
already been
in
found.
the intestine. They
He
died
didn't
in
tell
the
anyone at the
intestine.
scene, but it was Fabio's belief that the divers were dead long before authorities were even called. Just
they don't
after
got
he
the most
arrived,
oxygen.
Fabio was asked to dive into the cave and see
The oxygen don't last that long, so yeah, I know they died way before the authorities came. There's something about the intestines. I know what I learned is that how scary that is. Cave divers can actually, like, when they swim, they can actually accidentally, like, pick up a lot of dust in the soil. Like, they can pick up a lot of dust in the soil that'll fog up the water around them that you can't see nothing. I'm pretty sure they got no flashlight, so you screwed.
he entered the water, made his way to the entrance, descended down the first
This
vertical
should be a
shaft,
movie.
and made his way into the bottom tunnel where the opening to the intestine is located. When he entered the bottom tunnel and shined his flashlight ahead of him, he immediately stopped and turned around. When he resurfaced, he then confirmed to the Port Authority that the men were either trapped inside the tunnel or up in the air pocket of the second vertical shaft. The intestine was apparently so heavily silted out that most of the bottom tunnel still had near zero visibility.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Fabio
talking
knew
about.
then that the
It's
only
hard to
reason to
see.
keep searching
All
for
that-
them was to recover their
All them
bodies.
rocks and dust just.
Word of the missing divers spread around
Hold
Palinuro,
up.
and the reaction was pure disbelief. It seemed that everyone in Palinuro knew Camardella and Tancredi on some level and their reputation as highly skilled divers. The divers' social media filled with comments and posts expressing love and hope that they'd come out of this alive, no matter how bleak things looked from the start.
They already dead. They already
Then,
dead.
after waiting until they were sure the silt was settled, it took rescue divers only 4 hours to find Camardella and Tancredi. Both men were dead outside the entrance of the intestine. The silt out was so bad that even though Fabio had been just a few feet from them, he was unable to see their bodies.
Oh wow.
Then later, inside the intestine, Silvio's body was found wedged in one of the narrower sections.
He got stuck.
He was held so firmly by the rock all around him that it took 6 more days to free his body from the tunnel.
Really?
After their recovery, an investigation got underway to figure out what exactly had happened, and according to the official report, here's what is believed is the most likely scenario. When all 12 divers reached the wall, they split up into smaller groups to explore. It's unknown if it was planned or an impromptu decision, but Camardella, Tancredi, and Silvio entered the cave either way. Because Silvio's head was facing toward the entrance they used to enter the cave, it seems that the men had actually made it safely through the intestine, but then on the way back, Silvio got trapped. He was also in behind them when he got stuck and struggled to free himself. Then, because of how badly they had silted the bottom tunnel out, Camardella and Tancredi exited the cave without noticing that Silvio wasn't with them. They probably stopped for a moment to see if he was just lagging behind.
Yeah, how did he get out?
They went back into the cave to try to find him. When they re-entered Scarletta, it's unknown exactly how much air they had left. It's believed, though, that they realized Silvio wasn't with them around 11:30. This would have put all 3 of them on the cusp of tapping into their reserve air if they hadn't already reached that point.
But
If
they're outside
Silvio
the
panicked at
intestine,
all
so how
as
did he
was
get
stuck
out?
in the claustrophobic passage, his respiration rate would have increased and his air supply would have dwindled much faster. It's thought that Camardella and Tancredi lost track of time and failed to check their air gauges as they worked to try to save Silvio.
Oh.
The moment they ran out of air was likely the first moment they realized they were in serious trouble. Camardella and Tancredi are seen as selfless heroes who lost their lives while trying to save a friend.
Oh, so their tank was, they didn't, so they were, hey, that's a true friend. That's a true friend right there. Oh God, but rest in peace. I do like to go not skydiving, shoot. But I do like to go scuba diving, but not cave diving. I like to go scuba diving, cave diving.